I feel pretty safe assuming that you have probably participated in a survey at some point in time. The skills needed to complete a SharePoint survey are really not what we need to spend time on. I did want to, however, show you how they display when you first open them up, what kinds of fields you'll encounter, and the most important information, how you can view the results. So first, let's get into a survey. Unlike a lot of other content, they may or may not be displayed in the quick launch bar on the left-hand side of the screen. But if they're not, you'll probably receive an email invitation to participate in the survey. That usually happens when you're given permissions. You must have member permissions, in other words, the ability to add, edit, and remove things from a list, because a survey is just a list, in order to use them. But in this case, we do actually have our survey in the quick launch. So we'll move over to the left-hand side, and we'll click on what's called Training Feedback. Now, this is a list, but it doesn't look like a list when we first open it up. It has the name of the survey at the top, and it opens actually to a summary, giving you the name of the survey, a description if one was entered, when it was created, and how many responses there currently are. You also can see some links to see different types of summaries, like a graphical summary and showing all responses. We'll take a look at that after we fill it out. As a person who wants to respond to the survey, instead of clicking on a new link at the top of the screen, you're going to click a link that says Respond to this survey. That's what opens up the actual survey. Now, as I've said, I'm pretty sure that you've probably filled these out before, but I just wanted to show you a couple different types of fields that you might have. First of all, we do have a people picker, and like most surveys, you can see that if there's an asterisk, that means it's a required field. Because it's a people picker, we can use the address book, or we can just type. If you're going to type, you have to make sure that it's typed correctly. If you type in a name incorrectly, like this, it's not going to find it. In case you can't see it, there's an extra S in there. But if you type it correctly and click on the Check Names field, it should give it a solid underline. In everything Microsoft, including SharePoint and Outlook, when it recognizes a name as a valid user, it gives it a solid underline. The next, of course, is the ever-popular drop-down list. We like these because it means we don't have to type. People collecting the survey information like them because it means we don't make stuff up when we type. We're kind of limited to whatever they want us to put in. So we'll go ahead and make a choice here. We'll say Site Designer. The next one that I like to show is called a Likert scale. At least that's the technical name for it. In SharePoint and in surveys, they often call them ratings. It's when you're going to give a 1 to 5, 1 to 10, some type of rating like that. 1, by the way, is usually the lowest or bad, and 5 is usually highest, or 10 or 20 or whatever the high number is going to be the best. They should be labeled correctly, so make sure you take a look at them there as well. This is asking about our opinion on the following types of SharePoint components. So I'm just going to put that we basically love all of them. Maybe there's a couple we don't love so much. Also be aware that sometimes on the far right-hand side is a not applicable. In other words, if you haven't used something or if the question doesn't apply to you, it's better to do that than to use one of these. The reason is all of these equate to numbers. And as a person who makes her living off of evaluations, I can tell you that they matter. If 5 is good and 1 is 0, and you maybe didn't take a class from me, and so you go right in the middle, if we do the math, 3 out of 5 is actually 60%. And last time I checked, 60% is failing. It certainly is for an instructor eval. So the point here is make sure that you look at the right-hand side, and if something isn't appropriate, don't just make up a score. The second part of that is that all of this really does matter. So don't just haphazardly select numbers. If you don't have an opinion, leave it blank. All right, enough lecture. The last thing I wanted to show you, of course, is a date field. You can type in a date field, or most of the time, SharePoint will give you these wonderful little calendar drop-downs. So as I said, this is really the easy part. You may have a multi-page survey. In that case, you'll be able to go previous and next. But when you're at the end, you'll click on Finish. SharePoint instantly takes all of that information, just like you were creating a new list item, and it saves it. But because this is a survey, it also compiles that information. So you can see we currently have 2 responses. If you click or tap Show All Responses, this is going to give you the equivalent of a standard list view. It's pretty generic, response number 1, response number 2, response number 3, But these are all of the different responses that people filled out. It may or may not tell you who created it. It also tells you when it was done and if they actually completed the survey. And if you wanted to see their responses, you could simply click, just like opening a list item, and get into the read mode of their response and see specifically what they filled out for the survey. To move back, you can simply click back on training feedback. The other view that we have is the one called the graphical summary. And this is the one that I find most interesting and fascinating. First, because I don't have to export this to Excel and then spend endless hours making a bunch of graphs. SharePoint actually does it for us. Now, of course, some things they can't do, like name, they just show who the names are. They can tell you the roles. For example, we didn't have any users, any list admins, any site admins, but eventually we get down and we can see that 50% of our respondents were site designers and 50% were IT admins. Then, of course, it gives us our Likert scales, where we can see which percentage of people voted for which values. Here's one that gets a little more interesting. For blogs, we had 1 for 3 and 1 for 4. So these are pretty basic because we only have 2 responses. But you can see as more and more people fill out the survey, this gives us instant results. The graphical summary is really one of my favorite features because it is so fast and easy to check up and see how feedback is going, and to even show this page to a supervisor if you need to show them the information without taking a lot of extra time to do so. On the right-hand side, we can also change our view to any one of the 3 that we've been seeing. We have the overview, all responses, and graphical summary. We're going to go back to the overview, which is the view we initially see when we open the survey itself. Surveys in SharePoint, as I promised, are similar to others that you've taken. They provide different types of fields that you can use to answer questions or provide information, and those, of course, will vary from survey to survey, but they're all fairly intuitive. You may be able to submit the same survey more than once, but you may also be limited to only submitting it once. That's a setting that the person who creates the survey has to decide. When you do submit a survey, you may be able to view your results and possibly the results of others. That again is a setting. And another setting, you may not be able to edit your own responses, or you might be able to edit your responses and possibly even the responses of others. That last one doesn't happen very often. But these are 3 of the main settings that can be configured and can be different for each and every survey. If you can submit more than once, if you can edit yours, no one's, or everyone's survey, and if you will be able to see just your responses or those of others as well. If you are allowed to view the results, then they can be seen in 3 different ways. As a simple summary, which is really nothing more than when was a survey created and how many survey results are there, or more usefully, the individual list entries where you can see each individual survey, or a graphical summary, which is a huge time saver and allows you to understand what the survey results are without having to do a lot of thinking or a lot of manipulating of the data.